Genetic testing kits promised us a futuristic look into our DNA, all with the simplicity and convenience of a box delivered right to our front doors. But what happens when the companies behind the promises start to implode? From misleading health guidance to shocking privacy breaches, consumer genetic testing failures are starting to pile up. In this video, we'll dive deep into the dark side of consumer DNA testing, expose the cracks in the science, including my own personal experience, and unpack the fallout from the recent 23andMe debacle.
Consumer Reports warns while these tests can be helpful, some may find their results troubling.
These home testing kits initially gained popularity by promising to give you some information about where your ancestry stemmed from. You probably know how it works, at least at the basic level. You spit into a plastic tube, mail it off, and then a few weeks later, you get a DNA report with information about your background, inherited traits, etc. Early on, like many others, I was curious about my own origins and actually reached out to one of the big companies to partner up and help me investigate. But in the middle of the project, they abruptly shifted their focus from my family tree to the bigger financial pie in the game, health insights. They wanted me as a doctor to promote at-home genetic health testing. This was new to me, so I needed to look more deeply into what was being offered. When I dove in and actually looked at their data, I found that the health insights they were giving were usually incomplete or completely inactionable. For example, how valuable would it be to know that I'm at low risk for developing type 2 diabetes? Should I be eating more unhealthy now? Or another one, how useful is it to know that I'm at high risk for developing Alzheimer's disease? There's really no action I can take given that result, and now I'm forever scarred with that anxiety-provoking news. Then came all the issues for cancer testing. It seemed like that home testing kit was a legit test to rule out genetic cancers. But in reality, they were giving me results without testing all the potential mutations and sequences to make it a truly valuable test to use in lieu of proper genetic counseling. To me, this form of middle ground, entertainment-esque testing only created more confusion and certainly didn't replace a true meeting with a genetic specialist, so I killed the deal, and I've been very wary about these type of tests ever since. In fact, I've warned numerous patients and loved ones for years about the potential issues. And today, turns out I was right. Almost all my concerns have come to life with the recent disaster at 23andMe. Despite my early negativity of the industry, 23andMe started as a huge success story, once valued more than $6 billion. The 18-year-old company basically launched an entirely new industry, supplied data for studies on genetically influenced diseases, and helped cops solve cold cases. But lately, things haven't been going so well. All of the company's board members quit, and the company announced plans to lay off 40% of its employees and discontinue its therapeutics division, which had been working to develop cancer drugs. Why? Well, let's start with the fact that the science doesn't live up to the hype of the marketing. Initially, the FDA actually banned 23andMe from selling tests that included health information because they couldn't reliably predict disease risk. The FDA said consumers were being misled into thinking their results were clinically valid, and also that the test results were too complex for people to interpret on their own. I actually agree, because for example, if you were interested in genetic planning, let's say, or ruling out a genetic condition, these tests were not a replacement for a proper medical grade test and visit with a geneticist. Sadly, the FDA was pressured into backtracking on this ban, saying 23andMe tests came with clear enough disclaimers for consumers to know that the reports are basically just for fun and shouldn't be used to make medical decisions. Okay, sure, there are disclaimers, but the marketing for these direct-to-consumer genetic tests is really good. So good that even if companies don't say take your results seriously, people still do.
Do I have a cancer that is genetic? Do I have a heart condition that's gonna kill me in my sleep?
Actually, if you're worried that you're genetically predisposed to a serious disease, whether it's a cancer, a neurodegenerative disorder, or anything else with a hereditary component, then your first move should be talking to a doctor, not buying an at-home test. Then the hacking began. Last year, hackers were able to access genetic data for almost 7 million 23andMe users. Criminals broke into the accounts of people who reused usernames and passwords on previously hacked sites. Those hackers were then able to steal files with ancestry info for those who've opted into a DNA relatives feature that allows related users to automatically share data with each other. Hackers basically got access to your entire family tree, and for some reason, specifically went after users with Chinese or Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, and then sold that data on the dark web. While this hack affected a lot of people, it actually wasn't the worst case scenario. They got profile information, but thankfully they didn't steal the full genetic codes. The most relevant concern I have is about third-party data sharing. 23andMe isn't a healthcare organization, so they're not required to protect your health info the same way hospitals or even health insurance companies are, aka no HIPAA. It's allowed to share user data externally and can even change its sharing policies at any time. Originally, 23andMe shared genetic data with other companies and institutions unless users specifically said they couldn't. By default, they were sharing your data without you even knowing. Thankfully, this policy did change in 2018, and now you do need to give consent before your data goes somewhere else. But there are several types of consent. You can agree to let the company share your data with all third parties, like insurance companies and big pharma. One positive thing here is that health insurance companies can't deny coverage or charge people more based on their genetic testing results. Genetic discrimination has been prohibited by federal law since 2008. But that's only health insurance. In many cases, companies that sell disability or long-term care insurance are allowed to factor genetic information into their policies. Now, if you don't consent to all third-party sharing, you could still agree to let 23andMe share your data with researchers for studies. This can allow you to participate in research with your data pooled into a group, or let researchers use your individual level genetic data. Both pooled and individual level data are de-identified using a code or algorithm before being included in research to help protect the user's identity. However, some genetic privacy experts say it's theoretically possible for users to be traced back to their genetic data. In general, these privacy risks related to at-home genetic tests aren't new, but they're getting a ton of attention right now because of the 23andMe spiral. What troubles me most is if the company goes under or gets sold, who will own all that genetic data? Their user agreement states that if the company is acquired, user data will likely go to the company that buys it. And if that happened, the new owner could keep their current privacy policies or it could change them. It would be their choice. Right now, privacy laws in about 12 states would require customers to give consent before 23andMe could transfer their data to a new owner, but most states don't go that far, and there's no federal law to that effect. So what can 23andMe users actually do? For starters, remove consent from all types of third-party sharing. The other critical step is deleting your data ASAP. The website actually has instructions on how to do it. One caveat though, 23andMe outsources its genotyping to labs, and they are obligated to keep customers' genetic info as raw data with their sex and date of birth for a couple of years before deleting it, so it's not instant. My advice here, before you share genetic data with any company, think really carefully if it's worth the potential risks, review all user agreements and consent policies with a magnifying glass, and consider asking your doctor if a proper geneticist referral is better for you. Your DNA is the most personal data you have. It's not just an identifier, it's who you are. Why do we get hiccups? And how do you get rid of them? Click here to learn that, and as always, stay happy and healthy.